Tonight, Dow 10,000. The blue chip index hits that milestone for the first time in a year as investors give the economic recovery a vote of confidence. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, the distance between Wall Street and Main Street has never been greater. While financial firms are handing out record compensation, many Americans are getting laid off or taking pay cuts just to keep their jobs. The women of Afghanistan, how life has changed since the U.S. ousted the Taliban and how it hasn't. And the American spirit. She was brave enough to reveal a very personal story. And there's no telling how many lives she has saved because of it.
Thank you very
really
much.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
And good evening, everyone. For the second time in a year, the Dow Jones Industrial Average broke 10,000, but this time it did so while traveling in the preferred direction, up. The Dow gained more than 144 points today to close at 10,015, an amazing recovery. Since hitting bottom in March, the Dow is up nearly 53%. But the comeback from the meltdown that began last fall still has a long way to go. The Dow is still more than 4,000 points below its all-time high. Anthony Mason is our business correspondent. And Anthony, though we do have a long way to go, even pessimists must be feeling pretty good today.
Yeah, Katie, this is one of the market's all-time greatest rallies. You have to go back to the 1930s to see another bull run like this.
The historic rebound that brought the market back to Dow 10,000 has been led by the once battered bank stocks. Bank of America's up almost 400% since March. Citigroup up 375%. And American Express up 230%.
It's got to be nice to be back in this kind of territory.
It is. It's been a long time between drinks, though.
When the Dow first broke 10,000 back in March of 1999, veteran trader Art Cashin broke out his rally cap.
And what you have in your hand was the original one that I was wearing 10 years ago.
New caps were printed up for today.
A lot different, though, doesn't it?
It sure does. It sure does. The downside of it is it reminds people that for 10 years we've basically gone nowhere.
A decade ago, near the peak of the dot-com bubble, the market celebrated Dow 10,000. This time, the milestone's been met with more of a sigh of relief and doubts about whether stocks can stay at these levels.
We've made a lot of progress, and that's what the stock market is celebrating. But I don't know that the market can continue to move higher until it's very clear that this recovery that we're now in evolves into a self-sustaining economic expansion.
Where is the safe haven is what I want to know.
Investors like Scott Schaefer, manager at a Dallas electronics company, are still wary.
I'm not sure that we can look at just one number, this run-up, or the magical 10,000 number and think, wow, everything's fine, because that's not really the case.
Even with the rocket-like rally since March, the Dow is still down nearly 30% from its all-time high in 2007.
Is confidence back in this market?
Slowly coming back.
Trader Doreen Mogavera.
I think it is coming back. I think it still has a way to go, but I think it is coming back.
Wall Street likes to say 10,000 is just another number, but it could be a key psychological marker as the markets try to rebuild that confidence. And 5 digits look a lot more impressive than 4. Katie?
That's for sure. And Anthony, we brought in Jill Schlesinger, who's editor-at-large of CBSMoneyWatch.com and a certified financial planner. Good to see you, Jill. What does this mean for investors, especially for those who have 401ks?
Well, it really means that people have been getting more confident, buying stocks, chasing those performance higher with the hope stocks will keep going up. So not that it's going to necessarily happen, but that's the hope.
And this is really good news for people who are still in their careers or have a ways to go before retirement. But what about those who are about to retire or who already have?
Well, that's a problem, and hopefully they didn't have too much risk to begin with. But the bad news is they only can just work longer or spend less. Those are the bad choices they have to choose.
And Anthony, is this just a blip on the radar screen, or do you think happy days are here again on the stock market? What are people on the street telling you about that?
Well, it's certainly a big blip, Katie, but there is a real divide on the street. There are some who believe this rally still has legs, but there are also a lot of bears out there. And the key is going to be corporate earnings. If we don't see profits that come from real revenue growth, that's what investors are looking for. If it's just coming from from cost cutting, then the mood could swing on Wall Street again and the market could start to go south.
And that's a really good reason why investors shouldn't put 100% of their money in stocks today, just like they shouldn't have bailed out at the bottom in March.
All right, Jill Schlesinger and Anthony Mason. Double teaming tonight. Nice to see you both. Thanks so much. Now, if an economic recovery is underway, not everyone is sharing in it equally. Pick up today's Wall Street Journal and you'll read banks and securities firms are on track to pay their employees record amounts this year. And you pick up the New York Times and you'll see some workers are being forced to take huge pay cuts. National correspondent Jim Axelrod now on the Great Divide.
American Airlines pilots have had it, protesting company plans that could mean more job cuts. Captain Sam Mayer is tired of going backwards. He's lost $400 a week in pay since 2003.
We're struggling. You know, we've had to change the way our family does business, and my wife is, had to go back to work full time.
He's not alone. But according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, weekly pay for workers like Mayer, who make up 80% of the workforce, has declined for 9 consecutive months. That's never happened before.
This is the best of times and the worst of times, depending on where you are located.
If you're on Wall Street, it may just be the best of times, an analysis by the Wall Street Journal suggests. Looking at 23 top banks, hedge funds, and money managers, the Journal predicts a record-high compensation pool of $140 billion, on track to top 2007's record payout of $130 billion. Could the go-go days be back already?
But it's always the same argument. Unless you pay high bonuses, people will move elsewhere and we'll lose everybody to unregulated firms or abroad to London. Whether that's true is one of those unverified myths that keep getting cited but aren't really empirically demonstrated.
The Journal projects at year's end, compensation at Goldman Sachs will be up 99.8%. At Bank of America, 63.4%. Morgan Stanley comp levels will be up 33.3%. All this while corporate profits aren't nearly back to pre-crisis levels at all three, which took billions in bailout money.
I'm amazed. I mean, this industry sprang to life faster than Lazarus did. And I don't understand. If things were so bad, how comes they got so good so fast?
So, does Sam Mayer.
Right now, we're working at the equivalent buying power that we had in 1993.
Even Mayer concedes it could be worse. More than 26 million Americans are now either out of work, working fewer hours than they need, or have given up looking for a job altogether. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, New York.
In health news, the first injections of the H1N1 flu vaccine were given to the public today. But for children under 10, one shot will not be enough. The vaccine's maker says they'll need 2 injections to be fully protected. Dr. John LaPook is our medical correspondent. And John, we're about 10 days into the rollout of the H1N1 vaccine program. What is the government saying about parents who may be reluctant to get their children vaccinated?
Katie, I think they're saying by the time the vaccine really starts being rolled out and it continues to be safe as expected, that parents will start saying, you know what, it's safe, we're going to get on board.
So they're not that worried about it. And also there is unprecedented demand, I understand, for the seasonal flu vaccine, and we're starting to hear about shortages with that. Are we in danger of not having enough?
You have to think about it this way, okay? In a typical flu season, about 100 million Americans get the flu vaccine. Now, manufacturers say this year they're poised to give 115 million doses, so there should be plenty, right? The difference is there's a lot of shortages now early because we've never seen such unprecedented demand. 77 million doses have already been distributed. There's not even any seasonal flu vaccine yet. The good news is that the manufacturers say there'll be plenty of vaccine distributed, all 115 million doses, by the time the seasonal flu kicks in the winter.
So we don't need to worry too much about that either. All right, Dr. John LaPook. John, as always, thank you so much. And coming up next here on the CBS Evening News, the plight of women in Afghanistan 8 years later. Pakistan's Air Force kept up the pressure on the Taliban today, blasting away at their suspected hideouts along the Afghan border in South Waziristan. The Pakistani army plans to follow up with a ground offensive, and civilians have been fleeing to neighboring provinces. Also today, Britain pledged to add 500 soldiers to their 9,000 already in Afghanistan, but only if NATO and the Afghan government do more to fight the Taliban. The White House said again today President Obama is still weeks away from deciding whether to send more American troops. The president met this morning for a fifth time with his war council about ways to strengthen the Afghan army. Now, if there's one group in Afghanistan that absolutely dreads a Taliban resurgence, it's women. Chief Foreign Affairs correspondent Lara Logan continues our series, Afghanistan, The Road Ahead.
For Afghan women, the fall of the Taliban brought historic change.
I want to be a good doctor in the future.
More than 2 million girls are now in school. Some women are able to work, even in the most public of jobs, while others can now enjoy the simple pleasures they were denied. In the cities, a growing number of women cover only their heads instead of their whole bodies. All of this would have been unthinkable under the Taliban.
Women couldn't come out of their houses, couldn't move around freely and alone.
Dr. Masuda Jalal was jailed by the Taliban for her work helping women and children. She remembers their cruelty, seen by the world in this video of a woman being publicly executed during the height of Taliban power. After their defeat, Dr. Jalal became a symbol of how much had changed for Afghan women. In 2004, she was the first woman to run for president, finishing well ahead of most male candidates. She was appointed Minister of Women's Affairs, then removed, she says, for pushing too aggressively for women's rights.
We have provisions protecting women's rights and promoting women's rights within the Constitution, but it's not translated in action.
Female prisoners like these in Kabul today seem to have no rights at all. Kamela is just 29 years old. All it took to put her behind bars for 3 years was her husband's word. He accused her of stealing from him. After I was imprisoned, he got married to another woman, she says. I think he wanted to get married, so he put me here. Even more disturbing, violent attacks against women and girls continue today. Here, Atifa Bibi lies in a hospital, her face badly burned. She and a friend were victims of an acid attack late last year as they walked to school. This is Atifa today. Her wounds have healed, but she no longer goes to school. She told us she has nightmares almost every night. It cannot go away. Every minute it is with me, she said. Rates of violence against Afghan women are among the highest in the world. So is the maternal mortality rate. 3 years ago, we traveled to the remote province of Badakhshan because it has the highest maternal mortality rate ever recorded. That remains true today. 6,500 deaths per 100,000 births, compared to just 13 deaths per 100,000 in the U.S.
This is the female inpatients room.
The medical staff told us most of the women here are forbidden by their husbands from coming to this clinic or from seeing male doctors. Some die, she said. They're not allowed to come even to get simple medicine and treatment. In spite of these barriers, there has been progress. The number of Afghan women with access to newly built clinics like this has risen in recent years. But so has the influence of the Taliban. As the fight for control of this country intensifies, the small, fragile gains achieved by women and their most basic human rights are threatened. Lara Logan, CBS News, Washington.
And to see all the stories in our special series, you can go to cbsnews.com and click on Afghanistan, The Road Ahead. In other news tonight, a new look at J.C. Dugard, kidnapped 18 years ago as a child and rescued this past August. This new photo of Dugard, who's now 29, appears in this week's People magazine. It's the first since she was abducted in California in 1991. According to People, since her rescue, Dugard has been spending time with her family and enjoying cooking and horseback riding. Coming up next, a CBS News investigation. A giant wildfire was burning outside Los Angeles. So why were some firefighters told to stay away? In California, a sigh of relief today after a powerful storm lost much of its punch. It still caused a few small mudslides overnight, but nothing on the scale some had predicted after wildfires left the soil ripe for them. The greatest concern was an area outside Los Angeles hit by the massive station fire. It burned about 160,000 acres and killed 2 firefighters. And now Sandra Hughes tells us there are questions about whether that tragedy could have been averted.
We first met Cindy Payne just days after her home in the Angeles National Forest burned to the ground.
I got my grandmother's necklace and my wedding ring, and that's it.
But still, she was lucky compared to Julius Goff, who, along with a neighbor, got trapped by the flames.
What are you thinking at that point?
We were dead. We were crying. Both of us were crying.
He was burned over half of his body. Goff and many of his neighbors say firefighters missed the chance to douse the blaze early on.
There was not one helicopter, not one airplane.
No support whatsoever. We were just watching the canyon burn towards us.
The U.S. Forest Service was in charge of the firefight from day one, and it appears they underestimated what they were up against. According to internal fire incident reports obtained by CBS News, less than 24 hours after the fire started, officials reduced the number of firefighters on the ground from 231 to 191. They also slashed the aerial assault from 5 helicopters to 3, even though the fire, while small, was burning in rugged terrain not accessible to ground crews.
What do you think happened?
Breakdown in communications. Or somebody's trying to save money.
This internal Forest Service memo, written 3 weeks before the fire, reminds forest supervisors of the requirement that fire resources be managed to ensure no deficits and that overtime expenditures be minimized. An official review of the fire is now underway.
We'll find out from this review precisely why the judgments were made, and I have no reason to believe at this point in time that it was a mistaken judgment.
What will happen next time? Will we be simply left to defend ourselves again?
For now, the U.S. Forest Service is defending itself, saying officials believe the fire was under control before they pulled back resources. An apparent miscalculation with an estimated $100 million price tag for firefighting expenses. Sandra Hughes, CBS News in the Angeles National Forest.
Now to a painting that has stunned the art world. It was purchased here in New York by a Swiss collector 2 years ago. Thought by some to be a work of 19th century German art, it sold for $19,000. But now a fingerprint seems to confirm what the buyer suspected. It's actually a Da Vinci. If so, it would be his first major work identified in a century. And, oh, that price tag may now jump to around $150 million. Coming up next, women taking action that could save their lives, inspired by her American spirit. And finally tonight, breast cancer strikes fear in the hearts of many Americans, and younger women who are diagnosed often feel especially isolated. Now a member of Congress has turned her personal battle into a one-woman campaign to educate others. Nancy Cordes has her story, another example of the American spirit.
Thank you very much.
As a member of Congress, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is used to living her life out in the open. But until recently, she managed to hide a huge secret.
My main reason for wanting to deal with it privately until I was already all the way through it was so that I could protect my kids. Okay. Come on, guys.
She's talking about the 7 surgeries, including a double mastectomy she endured last year after discovering she had breast cancer at the young age of 41.
We have congressional recesses in which I was able to schedule my surgeries and, enough recovery time to be able to get back up and running when we went back into session. So I juggled. Good luck on the test.
The mother of 3, who commutes from Florida, is used to juggling. And on the Hill, she's known for being tough and blunt.
That she doesn't know anything and isn't ready to be vice president.
Which is why the Congresswoman surprised everyone this spring when she came forward and broke down.
I didn't find my tumor early because of luck. I found my tumor early because of knowledge and awareness.
But it's what happened since that day
Your story will save many young and old women.
that surprised her even more.
Got so many emails and handwritten letters, hundreds and hundreds like this. It's just been absolutely incredible.
All of them thanking her for coming forward.
I was at a parade and a woman came up, grabbed my wrists and said, "You saved my life, Debbie." And she said, After she saw my story, she did a breast self-exam right away, and she found a lump.
Hey, you guys! It made her realize how many women, especially young women, are unfamiliar with the risk breast cancer poses. More than 25,000 American women younger than 45 are diagnosed with the disease every year. 8 of those women die each day.
We must do better.
Wasserman Schultz decided to write her own bill, which would give grants to educate young women on how to detect breast cancer and how to deal with it.
Half of young women are not receiving the timely treatment that they need.
And they rarely get tested to see if, like Wasserman Schultz, they are genetically predisposed to breast cancer. How are you feeling now?
No, I'm feeling great. I mean, everything is good.
All because she caught her cancer early, a lesson she decided was just too important to keep secret. Nancy Cordes, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.